My name is Alara Meadows. I've always found solace in the quiet unfolding of things, the way a seed pushes through earth, the slow turn of seasons across the fields, the patient mending of a favorite teacup. Perhaps that's why the clamor of my sister Serena's pronouncement, delivered with such brittle triumph, felt so jarring, like a stone thrown into a still pond. The solicitor just called. Alara, Serena's voice, bright and sharp, crackled through the phone line a week after Dad's funeral. She was staying at a boutique hotel in the city, having declared our father's beloved countryside cottage too rustic for her sensibilities. He read me Dad's will. Arthur left everything to me. The nursery, the land, the investments. Everything. You, apparently, get his gardening book collection. Her laugh was short, triumphant. I suppose it's fitting, isn't it? You always did prefer dirt to diamonds. I let her words settle, like dust motes in a sunbeam. There was no surprise, only a familiar ache, a whisper of the old sorrow. I waited a full week, a week filled with the scent of damp earth from Dad's cherished gardens and the quiet rustle of condolence cards. Then, I invited her to the cottage for tea, under the guise of discussing the next steps. She arrived in a cloud of expensive perfume, dressed in city black that looked out of place against the faded floral wallpaper Dad had loved. She placed a sleek leather briefcase on the worn oak table between us. My solicitor drew up some papers for you to sign, she announced, already reaching for the latches. Just formalities, acknowledging the terms of the will. Then I can get started on liquidating, well, modernizing things. I poured her a cup of Darjeeling, the porcelain clinking softly. Serena, I began, my voice even. A will is a document that speaks to the assets held by an individual at the time of their passing. She waved a dismissive hand, already imagining herself as the benevolent heiress. Yes, I know. And Dad owned quite a lot, didn't he? More than I ever realized. He did, once, I agreed softly. I slid a slim, unassuming folder across the table, nudging aside her imposing briefcase. But for the past 5 years, Serena, since his first major health crisis, Dad's affairs were managed under a comprehensive power of attorney. A power of attorney he granted to me. Her smile faltered, a tiny crack in the confident facade. Power of what? What does that have to do with anything? The will is the will. It has everything to do with it, I continued, my gaze steady. To ensure his continued care, to protect what he'd built from the enormous costs of that care, and to maintain the stability of the growing season, his assets were, quite legally and with his full awareness during his lucid periods, restructured. The nursery, the land, the investments, they were gradually transferred into trusts and a limited liability company that I manage, with Dad as the sole beneficiary during his lifetime. At the time of his passing, the estate subject to probate, the assets actually in his name to be distributed by the will. I paused, letting the reality sink in. Were, in fact, quite modest. His gardening books, some personal effects, and a small savings account. Serena stared at me, the triumph draining from her face, replaced by a wave of confusion, then dawning disbelief, and finally, a flush of pure, unadulterated rage. What are you saying? That's impossible. You tricked him. You stole from him. I sipped my tea, the familiar warmth a small comfort. The moment wasn't one of triumph for me, it was one of profound sadness, the culmination of years of difficult choices made in love and necessity. No, Serena, I said gently. I took care of him. And I took care of what he built. There's a significant difference. But I'm getting ahead of myself, aren't I? This quiet confrontation, smelling of Earl Grey and roses from Dad's garden, was the end of one story, but the beginning of understanding it requires stepping back to the sun-drenched fields of our childhood and the diverging paths we chose. Growing up, Serena and I were like two different varietals of rose grown in the same soil. She, the flamboyant, attention-grabbing hybrid tea, and I, the quieter, more resilient old garden rose, content to bloom in my own time. She was all vibrant color and intoxicating fragrance, effortlessly drawing the admiration of everyone she met. I was more grounded, finding my joy in the texture of soil between my fingers, the intricate patterns of a leaf, the quiet wisdom of our father, Arthur. He owned the Growing Season, a local nursery and garden center that was more than just a business. It was his heart's work, a place where people came not just for plants, but for advice, for community, for a piece of the earth's magic. While Serena was cultivating her social life in the city, attending gallery openings and weekend retreats with our mother after our parents' amicable but definitive separation when I was 15, I chose to stay with Dad. Our small cottage, nestled beside the sprawling acres of the nursery, felt more like home than the sleek, impersonal apartment Mom and Serena shared. "You're burying yourself out here, Alara," Serena would sigh during her infrequent visits, her perfectly manicured nails tapping impatiently on the rustic kitchen table. "Dad's little plant shop is charming, I suppose, but it's hardly a future." Mom, too, would express her gentle concerns. "Darling, you have such a keen mind. You could have pursued any academic path, but you seem content to just potter about." What they didn't see, or perhaps chose not to, was the quiet hum of growth, both in the fertile soil of the Growing Season and within me. Dad's little plant shop was, in reality, a thriving enterprise encompassing 3 retail locations, several acres of prime agricultural land used for cultivation, a few small rental cottages on the periphery of the property, and an emerging online consultancy for landscape design. While Serena pursued a series of degrees in subjects that seemed to change with the seasons, art history, then holistic wellness, then a brief, expensive foray into interior design, I was quietly earning my degree in horticulture and business management through evening and online classes, applying what I learned directly to Dad's expanding operations during the day. Dad saw it. "Alara, my little sprout," he'd say, his eyes crinkling at the corners as we reviewed the monthly accounts I meticulously prepared. "You have a true gift for this. A gentle hand and a sharp mind. The Growing Season is flourishing under your touch." He'd pause, a wistful look crossing his face. "Your sister, Serena, has other gifts, a different kind of bloom." Serena's other gifts often involved an uncanny ability to materialize precisely when her finances were dwindling. Dad, with his endlessly generous heart, never refused her. Funds for seed money, for artistic projects that never seemed to germinate, deposits for chic city apartments she'd inhabit for mere months, designer outfits deemed essential for networking events that yielded no tangible opportunities. He loved us both, deeply and unequivocally, but I saw the weariness in his eyes as the years passed, a quiet concern for Serena's apparent inability to find her own footing. Everything shifted 5 years ago, on a crisp autumn afternoon when the maples were ablaze with color. Dad collapsed while pruning his beloved heritage roses. A stroke. I was by his side in the hospital within the hour, the scent of antiseptic jarringly replacing the familiar earthy fragrance of the nursery. Serena arrived 3 days later, flying in from a yoga retreat in Bali, her expression a mixture of carefully performed concern and genuine irritation. "This is such dreadful timing," she lamented, scrolling through her phone in the Stark Hospital waiting room. "I have a non-refundable booking for a silent meditation course in Provence next month." While Serena was preoccupied with her travel itinerary, I was grappling with the doctor's prognosis and planning for Dad's long-term care. The stroke had affected his mobility significantly, and his speech, once so rich and expressive, was now hesitant and slurred. There were concerns about potential cognitive decline. It was then, amidst the beeping machines and hushed medical consultations, that I gently suggested the need for a durable power of attorney. "Just to help manage things with the Growing Season, Dad," I explained, holding his weathered hand, its skin still bearing the faint scent of soil. "And to make sure all your healthcare needs are taken care of seamlessly. You know I'll always look after things, just as you taught me." He squeezed my hand, his eyes, though clouded with fatigue, holding a flicker of trust and understanding. He nodded. We signed the documents with his solicitor, Mr. Finch, a kind, elderly gentleman who had handled Dad's affairs for decades. Serena was in the hospital cafeteria on a lengthy video call with a friend, discussing the merits of various organic juice cleanses. She barely registered the quiet significance of that moment. The power of attorney was comprehensive, covering both his financial and healthcare decisions. It was a heavy responsibility, one I accepted with a solemn heart. The subsequent 5 years were a tapestry woven with threads of deep love, quiet perseverance, and profound challenges. I moved back into the cottage full-time, transforming my old bedroom into a haven of calm for Dad. I coordinated a team of wonderful caregivers, oversaw his myriad therapies, and managed the increasingly complex operations of the growing season. Under my stewardship, the business didn't just survive, it thrived. I modernized our inventory systems, expanded our online presence to include virtual garden consultations and bespoke plant subscription boxes, and carefully cultivated partnerships with local artisans and sustainable growers. The rental cottages were thoughtfully renovated, becoming charming countryside retreats that generated a steady, reliable income. Dad's overall financial health improved significantly, growing from a comfortable but somewhat passively managed collection of assets to a robust and dynamic portfolio worth considerably more. Serena's visits remained sporadic, usually coinciding with a perceived financial emergency on her part. She'd drift in, a whirlwind of city energy and exotic perfumes, take a few artfully composed selfies with Dad for her social media feed, captioned with poignant hashtags like #FamilyLove, #Daddy'sGirl, #CherishMoments, offer a few vague complaints about the quietness of the countryside, and depart with a generously written check from what she still perceived as Dad's inexhaustible personal funds. She never inquired about the intricacies of the business, never offered to assist with Dad's care, never even seemed to retain the names of the dedicated women who tended to him daily. "It's all rather melancholic here, isn't it?" she'd remark, wrinkling her nose at the scent of lavender and chamomile that permeated the cottage. "Why don't you consider one of those lovely assisted living communities, Alara? The ones with watercolor classes and string quartets in the evenings? Dad would adore that." "He wants to be here, Serena," I'd explain, my voice weary from countless repetitions of the same conversation. "In his home, surrounded by his gardens. Well," she'd say with a careless shrug, "when this place eventually becomes mine, I'm afraid I'll have to sell it. Too many faded memories. I'll need something much more contemporary." She spoke of his passing as if it were an inevitable inconvenience on her path to inheritance, his life a mere prelude to her financial emancipation. It was during those conversations that a quiet resolve began to form within me, a determination to protect not just Dad's well-being, but also the legacy he had built with his own 2 hands, a legacy she seemed to view merely as a collection of assets to be liquidated. I began to document every decision, every transaction, every moment of care, with meticulous precision. 2 years after his first stroke, Dad suffered a second, more debilitating one. His cognitive abilities declined more noticeably. There were days filled with lucid moments, when his eyes would sparkle with their old warmth and he'd whisper my name, his hand gripping mine. But there were also days shrouded in confusion when he wouldn't recognize me, his gaze distant and clouded. Serena's visits dwindled further. "It's just too heartbreaking, seeing him like this," she'd say tearfully over the phone, though her distress never seemed to impede her ability to accept the monthly financial support I continued to arrange from Dad's accounts to cover her essential living expenses. In Los Angeles. It was then, with a heavy heart, and after much consultation with Mr. Finch and a trusted financial advisor, that I began the process of restructuring Dad's assets. It wasn't a decision made lightly, nor was it done in secrecy from a legal standpoint. Every transfer was executed through proper legal channels, fully documented, and justified by the pressing need to shield his estate from the potentially crippling costs of long-term care to ensure the uninterrupted management of the growing season, and to optimize for tax efficiency. The nurseries and land were gradually transitioned into a carefully structured family trust, with myself as the managing trustee and Dad as the lifetime beneficiary, ensuring all income generated continued to support his care. The rental cottages were placed under the umbrella of a small LLC I established for the same purpose. His investment portfolio was similarly moved into a secure trust, its proceeds dedicated to his well-being. My name appeared as owner or trustee, but the purpose was always clear: the preservation of his assets for his benefit. Dad's care never faltered. In fact, with the more streamlined and efficient financial structure, we were able to enhance it, bringing in specialized therapists and acquiring equipment that eased his daily life. Serena remained oblivious, caught up in her sun-drenched Los Angeles existence, her social media feed a curated tapestry of wellness retreats, art gallery openings, and inspirational quotes about living authentically and manifesting abundance, all while unknowingly funded by the quiet, diligent stewardship of Dad's legacy. She never requested financial statements, never questioned the source of her regular allowance, never wondered about the tired lines that had etched themselves around my eyes during her brief, performative visits. 6 months ago, on a quiet spring morning when the scent of rain-washed earth and blooming lilacs filled the air, Dad passed away peacefully in his sleep. I was holding his hand, whispering stories of the gardens he loved, the same way he used to whisper them to me as a child. Serena was attending a film festival in a desert oasis town, her phone switched off. It took 2 days for the news to reach her. When she finally arrived, her grief seemed overshadowed by a restless anticipation. "Did Dad ever get around to updating his will?" she asked, even before we had chosen the flowers for his service. "I believe Mr. Finch has all his affairs in order," I replied, my voice carefully neutral. The funeral was a beautiful, heartfelt tribute to a well-loved man. Serena played the role of the bereaved daughter with an almost theatrical flourish, her sobs artfully timed, her eulogy filled with touching anecdotes of a close father-daughter bond that, from my perspective, had been more aspirational than actual. I listened quietly as she spoke of all the precious time we spent together and the immense sacrifices she had made to be there for him in his final years. It took all my strength to remain silent, to not let the bitter truth spill out and mar the sanctity of the occasion. A week later, we gathered in Mr. Finch's sun-drenched, book-lined office for the reading of the will. Serena, dressed in an impeccably tailored black dress that whispered of quiet luxury, tapped her foot impatiently, occasionally glancing at her phone. I wore a simple navy blazer, the one I'd worn to countless meetings with suppliers, accountants, and therapists over the past 5 years. Mr. Finch, his kind eyes looking at us over his half-moon spectacles, cleared his throat. "Arthur's last will and testament was drafted some 8 years ago," he began, his voice gentle. "It is quite straightforward. It states, and I quote, 'I leave all my worldly goods, chattels, and estate, both real and personal, to be divided equally between my beloved daughters, Serena Meadows and Alara Meadows.'" A radiant smile spread across Serena's face. "Equal. You see, Alara? Dad loved us both the same. Half of everything. The nurseries, the cottages, the investments. I finally get what I'm due." "Indeed," Mr. Finch continued, his gaze steady, "the will dictates an equal division. However, we must now consider the specific assets that constitute Mr. Meadows's estate at the time of his passing." "What's there to consider?" Serena interjected, her voice sharp with impatience. "Just tally it all up and divide by 2. It's not complicated." It was then that Mr. Finch slid a single sheet of paper across his polished mahogany desk. "An inventory of the estate's assets." It was remarkably brief. Serena snatched it up, her brow furrowing as she scanned the contents, her face growing progressively paler. "This This can't be accurate. It says the total value of the estate is barely enough to cover final expenses and a few small personal bequests. That's preposterous. The growing season nurseries and the associated land were transferred into the Meadows Family Trust 3 years ago, with Alara as the managing trustee, Mr. Finch explained calmly. This was a perfectly legal and documented transfer, executed under the durable power of attorney your father granted to Alara. Similarly, the rental cottages were transferred to an LLC, also managed by Alara, for the benefit of your father's care. The majority of the investment portfolio was likewise placed in trust. Serena's hands trembled as she clutched the paper. This is theft. She's manipulated everything. Dad would never have agreed to this. He wanted me to be taken care of. Your father was kept informed of all significant transactions, Serena. During periods when his health allowed for such discussions, Mr. Finch interjected, his tone firm but kind. Alara provided detailed quarterly reports. These measures were implemented primarily to protect the assets from potential liabilities related to ongoing healthcare costs and to ensure the continuity of the business that supported him. Speaking of which, he added, opening another folder, these are records of the out-of-pocket expenses Alara personally covered for your father's care during the last 2 years, when liquid funds within the estate were running low. The total amounts to a rather substantial sum. I finally spoke, my voice quiet in the suddenly charged silence of the room. I never sought reimbursement, Serena. My only concern was Dad's comfort and well-being. Serena leaped to her feet, her face contorted with rage. You calculating, manipulative. You planned this all along. You poisoned Dad against me. I was present, Serena, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, yet carrying the weight of years. Every single day, for 5 years. I bathed him, fed him, read to him, managed his pain, held his hand through countless sleepless nights. I kept his business, his legacy, alive. Where were you? I had a life to live, she retorted, her voice shrill. I couldn't just abandon everything and play nurse. But you were quite content to abandon everything to claim his money, I observed, not with accusation, but with a weary sadness. She lunged towards me, but Mr. Finch rose swiftly, placing a calming hand on her arm. Miss Meadows, Serena, please. I must advise you that contesting the legal arrangements Alara put in place will be exceedingly difficult. She has meticulously documented every decision, every expenditure, every consultation regarding your father's care and his financial affairs. You, on the other hand, have a vibrant social media presence detailing your life in Los Angeles, your travels, your pursuits. Serena, however, was not easily deterred. She engaged a succession of solicitors, 3 different firms in as many months, each of whom, after reviewing the extensive documentation I provided, reluctantly informed her that my actions had been impeccably legal, ethically sound, and entirely justifiable under the terms of the comprehensive power of attorney. The paper trail, as Mr. Finch had predicted, was unassailable. Defeated in the legal arena, she turned to the court of public opinion, attempting to paint me as the scheming sister who defrauded our ailing father and stole her rightful inheritance across various social media platforms. This, too, backfired. Dad's caregivers, loyal and compassionate women who had witnessed my daily devotion, posted heartfelt testimonials about my unwavering care, contrasting it sharply with Serena's prolonged absences. Old school friends and members of our local community chimed in, recalling my quiet dedication to Dad and the growing season over the years, while Serena had pursued a more distant, self-focused path. Even Mom, who had always instinctively sided with Serena, admitted in a rare moment of candor that she couldn't recall Serena ever making a sustained effort to be present for Dad during his illness. The modest sum remaining in Dad's probate estate, after all final expenses were settled, was indeed divided equally, as per the terms of his will. Serena's share amounted to a few £1,000s. She exhausted most of it on her fruitless legal battles. Now she calls occasionally, her tone veering wildly between veiled threats and tearful appeals. Last week, a strained voicemail. Alara, I'm facing eviction. I know we've had our disagreements, but we're sisters. Dad wouldn't want to see me destitute. He would want you to help me. I sat in Dad's old armchair, the scent of his pipe tobacco still faintly clinging to the worn velvet, and thought for a long time. I remembered all the times Dad had rescued Serena, the hopeful look in his eyes each time, followed by the inevitable disappointment when her patterns remained unchanged. I thought of the countless nights I'd spent by his bedside, the business decisions weighed and made while simultaneously coordinating medication schedules, the quiet sacrifice of my own youth to ensure his dignity and comfort. I sent her a bank transfer for a modest amount, enough to cover a month's rent and some essentials. With it, a gently worded note. Serena, I believe Dad would wish for you to have a chance to find your footing. This is offered in that spirit. It is, however, a one-time gesture. I encourage you to use it to build something sustainable for yourself. She accepted the funds. There was no acknowledgement, no thank you. A few days later, she blocked me on all her social media accounts. Then, a week after that, unblocked me to send a curt message requesting more. I didn't reply. Some boundaries, once established, must be held. The growing season is not just thriving, it's blossoming. We recently acquired an adjacent parcel of land, allowing us to expand our organic herb cultivation and establish a small community-supported agriculture program. The rental cottages have been lovingly restored and are now sought-after havens for those seeking respite in the countryside, their income providing a stable foundation for the business and for community outreach projects. The investment portfolio, carefully managed, now funds a small horticultural scholarship program for local students, a tribute to Dad's belief in nurturing young talent. I chose to keep Dad's cottage, not as a monument to the past, but as a living repository of love and lessons. Serena was right. There are memories etched into its very fabric, some poignant with sadness, but so many more luminous with joy. Every worn flagstone in the garden path, every sun-faded curtain, every chipped teacup echoes with his presence, his gentle wisdom, his quiet laughter. Last month, while sorting through his old roll-top desk, I found a letter, tucked away in a dusty ledger. It was in Dad's familiar, elegant script, dated about a year before his passing, during a period of relative lucidity. My dearest Alara, it began. If you are reading this, it likely means I am no longer with you, and you have shouldered burdens far heavier than any child should bear. Please know, my little sprout, that my trust in you is, and always has been, absolute. You have shown me the true meaning of love, not in grand pronouncements or fleeting gestures, but in the unwavering commitment of your daily presence, your quiet sacrifices, your gentle strength. Serena, my vibrant, complicated girl, has her own journey, her own lessons to learn. Do not allow guilt to cloud your heart for the decisions you have undoubtedly had to make to protect what we built together, to protect me. You have earned every blessing, every success, not through entitlement, but through tireless effort and an honest heart. All my love, always, Dad. I had the letter framed, its paper softened with age, and hung it in my small office overlooking the rose garden, next to a photograph taken on his last Good Father's Day. He is smiling, a faint but genuine smile, despite the visible signs of his illness. I am beside him, my hand resting on his, my expression a mixture of weariness and profound affection. Serena is not in the picture. She was, as I recall, attending an exclusive wellness seminar in Tuscany that weekend. The power of attorney was indeed a legal instrument, granting authority. But its true power, I came to understand, lay in the moral and emotional responsibility it conferred, the power to protect, to nurture, to act with integrity and love when a cherished one is most vulnerable. It was about stewardship, not ownership in the possessive sense. Serena perceived inheritance as a birthright, a passive reception of assets. She never understood that true inheritance lies not in what is given, but in what is cultivated, in character, in effort, in the bonds of love and duty. She still posts occasionally from Los Angeles, her narratives filled with themes of resilience and overcoming adversity, often accompanied by filtered images of herself in glamorous settings. She is nearly 40 now, still chasing an elusive dream of effortless success, still seemingly convinced that the world owes her a comfortable existence. Me? You can find me most days at the growing season, my hands in the soil, helping a young couple choose the right apple tree for their first garden, or advising an elderly woman on the best herbs for a soothing tea. It is honest work, tangible work, the kind Dad revered, the kind that connects you to the earth and to the quiet, steady rhythms of life. My business manager, a pragmatic woman with a kind heart, often remarks, "Alara, you've built an empire here. You could easily delegate the day-to-day. You've earned a rest." "Perhaps," I reply, carefully repotting a fragile orchid. But this is where I feel most alive, most connected to what truly matters. Besides, I add, a gentle smile touching my lips, Dad always said the greatest legacy isn't what you leave behind in terms of wealth, but what you cultivate in terms of wisdom, resilience, and the ability to nurture growth, in yourself and in others. Serena never quite grasped that lesson. She was too preoccupied with claiming her perceived share of the harvest to realize that the real treasure was the opportunity to tend the garden alongside the gardener, to learn from his wisdom, to share in the quiet joy of watching things grow. By the time she arrived to claim her inheritance, the true essence of it had already been carefully, lovingly, and legally stewarded by the daughter who understood that love is not measured in what you receive, but in the steadfast devotion of what you give. The will stipulated an equal division, and in the end, that is precisely what transpired. We each received exactly what we had nurtured, what we had earned, what we deserved. And in my quiet garden, surrounded by the legacy of my father's love, I have found a profound and lasting peace.